My name is Brandon Kirby, and I'm the Director of Marketing, Sales, and Admissions at Rotterdam School of Management, Erasmus University. And I oversee both the teams for our MBA programs as well as our Executive Education Open programs. And I've been with the school for nearly 5 years. And in a previous life, I worked in the hospitality and the branding and advertising industries before completing my MBA. So I've had the opportunity to be on both sides of the table, and I'm looking forward to sharing some insights with you. I think when candidates are thinking about personal branding, they need to think about the entire customer journey. It's not just about the impression that you make with the admissions people that you come into contact with, but it's also about your peers and colleagues in the classroom, the faculty who are around you, and then of course, eventually, when you go off looking for a job, the people that are sitting in front of you during an interview process. So from the moment you consider doing an MBA, all the way through when you graduate and are on the job market afterwards, your personal brand is really, really critical for the way in which you approach things. And oftentimes we find that candidates struggle a little bit, especially if they don't come from a background that involves branding. Oftentimes when we think about branding, it's more about a product. But the thing to remember is that the candidate, or as the candidate, in this case, you are the product. So it's important to make sure that you put your best foot forward. So whether that be doing research on the schools that you're speaking with, making sure that you're answering the questions that people are asking you, all the way down to the little things. How are you dressed? What mannerisms do you have? How do you appear on camera? Because that's very important now as well. All of these things go into the idea of your personal brand. And it's something that a lot of times we don't think about, but of course is getting much more consideration now, especially in the modern business arena in which we live. Telling us a story. And if you think about things you remember, oftentimes there's a story wrapped around it. If you think about an experience that you had when you were younger, oftentimes the way that we communicate that experience is through telling a story. And I think that's really critical for candidates, especially when if you're in the interview process or even before when you're meeting with an admissions person on the road, giving them something to remember you by, because maybe they've met 50, 100, 200 other candidates, or maybe they've reviewed 75 applications that day. It's very similar to a job search in one way or another, where telling us a story or giving us something to remember you by, I think is really critical for candidates that are trying to cut through the clutter of all the different people that are applying. So if I think back to the interviews that really resonated with me or the candidates that really stuck out, oftentimes it's because they found a story or they found something to make them stand out a little bit. So when you're working on that, try to make that connection, because that's what this is all about. The MBA, but also business in general, is about making a connection. So if you can find something that we have in common or something that you can tell me about you, when I go to the decision-making process or when I go to the admissions committee and I'm fighting for your case to get you a scholarship or things like that, those are the things that are really going to stand out and help not only to create a great relationship, but help you during your MBA journey as well. When it comes to do's and don'ts, we could probably fill an entire video just on this particular topic, but two that I think are really important. The first one is a do. If you haven't sat down yet, think about the words that you would use to describe yourself. Is it intense? Is it energetic? Is it friendly? Is it stern? What are the words that you would use to describe yourself? And once you've done that, then you need to try to model your behavior, especially when you're in an interview setting or a more professional setting. You want to model your behavior based on those words that you have thought about yourself. Another great way to do that is to ask your peers and colleagues to also describe you in a few words. And after you get that with what people think of you and what you think of yourself, you can sort of triangulate where that is. If you know what kind of brand that you're trying to put across, you can do things to articulate that brand. So again, if it's all about being energetic or compassionate, you can make sure that when you're providing answers or you're giving input to people, that you're able to do it from that perspective. I think one of the don'ts for personal branding is, on the opposite side of that is, don't try to be someone you aren't. Oftentimes, candidates think they know what a school is looking for. Well, I know what the fit is for this school, so therefore I'm going to model or change my behavior to fit what I think the school wants. If that aligns with who you are and your personal brand, that's great. However, if you're cutting against who you are, ultimately you're putting on an act, and eventually it won't work for you. You'll either forget how to be the way you thought you should have been. So I think understanding who you are, And then also understanding who you aren't, if that makes sense, is a great way to put your first foot forward when developing your personal brand. And then from there, you can do an extension into the kinds of emails that you're writing or the way your CV might look. You want it to be a reflection of you, but it all starts from having a real strong understanding of who you are as an individual, and then you can develop your personal brand.